When your own parents look you in the eyes and say, "You're no longer one of us," it carves a wound you can never quite heal. I lost everything until Grandpa did the unthinkable. I remember the exact moment my world fell apart. It wasn't a scream or a slap or even some catastrophic blowout. It was a calm, measured voice, my mother sitting across from me at the kitchen table, saying, "From this day forward, you're no longer family. You're on your own." No yelling, no tears, just cold finality. Like I was a guest overstaying my welcome. But let me back up, because betrayals like this don't come out of nowhere. They brew for years, quietly, like poison in water. Growing up, I always thought love was earned. That if I worked hard enough, was obedient enough, made my parents proud enough, they'd love me the way they loved my older brother, Zach. Zach, the golden child. He could do no wrong. He crashed my dad's car when he was 17, and they still bought him another one for graduation. I once got grounded for getting a B+ in chemistry, but I didn't complain. I told myself it was just the way things were. Some kids get sunshine, some grow in the shadows. I was the shadow. My mom, Diane, adored Zach. She posted his baby pictures all over Facebook, attended every football game, and proudly announced his every achievement like it was a Nobel Prize. Me? I was the quiet one, the sensitive child. Dad called me a late bloomer. He'd say it like it was a disease. Still, I tried. I joined debate club. I got straight A's. I volunteered. I was even valedictorian. But at my graduation, they barely clapped. Meanwhile, when Zach got a C+ in community college economics, they threw him a steak dinner and a bottle of champagne. But I held my tongue, buried the resentment, and smiled through it all. Because deep down, I still wanted to be part of them. I wanted to belong. The real fracture happened when Grandpa Joe, my dad's father, got sick. He'd always been the only one who truly saw me. When I was little, he used to pull me aside during family dinners and whisper, "You've got a spark, kid. Don't let them smother it." He was crusty and old school, but his eyes were kind. He never played favorites. He loved Zach and me differently, but equally. And when he started needing care, guess who stepped up? Not Zach. Zach said he was too busy with work, which, by the way, meant sitting around vaping and talking about some startup that never actually launched. So I, fresh out of college, barely managing my own bills, moved into Grandpa's house. I cooked, cleaned, helped him bathe, handled the hospital visits, meds, everything. And still, my parents never said thank you. They never offered to help, never asked how I was holding up. They just said, "That's good of you." You know how Grandpa is. He always liked you more. Like love from him was a fluke. But one night, about 6 months into caring for him, Grandpa called me to his bedside. His voice was weaker than I'd ever heard it. He told me to open the top drawer of his nightstand. There was a sealed envelope inside, with my name on it. "Don't open it yet," he said. "Not until I'm gone. Then take it to the lawyer. And don't say a damn word to your father." I was stunned. "Why?" I asked. He just shook his head slowly. "Because he's made his choices, and he doesn't deserve what I built." I didn't know what to say. I sat there holding the envelope, heart pounding. I wanted to ask more, to understand, but he closed his eyes and drifted off. Grandpa passed away 3 weeks later. His funeral was small, quiet. Zach didn't even show. Said he had a networking event. I was the one who held Grandma's trembling hand, who delivered the eulogy, who went back to that now empty house and sat in the silence he left behind. After the funeral, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in Grandpa's messy, deliberate handwriting, and a copy of his new will. He had changed everything. He had left the house, his savings, even the small antique store he owned, all to me. There was one line I'll never forget. "To the only one who showed up when it mattered." I cried. I cried like a child, sobbing on his couch, the smell of his aftershave still lingering in the air. But I made a mistake. I trusted my parents. I shouldn't have. A week later, I invited them over. I thought naively that they'd be happy Grandpa had entrusted me with something so meaningful, that they'd be proud of me. Instead, my father's face turned red with rage. My mother stared at me like I'd just confessed to a murder. "He did what?" Dad said through clenched teeth. I told them everything. The caregiving, the envelope, the lawyer, the new will. I even offered to share some of the inheritance, thinking maybe this would finally bring us closer. Dad slammed his fist on the table. "You manipulated him. You turned him against us." I was speechless. Mom chimed in. "You always were a little snake, always playing the victim, looking for pity." He was old, Confused. You took advantage. I sat there in shock. I tried to explain, to tell them how lonely and hard it was to care for someone dying. How I didn't even ask for anything. But they didn't want to hear it. They stood up, just like that. Dad pointed at me and said, "If you're going to be greedy, then be greedy alone. We are no longer your family. You're dead to us." Double quotes, dead. The silence after they left that night was louder than anything I'd ever heard. I didn't sleep. I stared at my phone, aching for a message. Maybe from Mom. Maybe she'd cooled off. Maybe she'd realized I wasn't the villain in this story. But nothing came. Days passed. Then weeks. Then I got the letter. Handwritten. No return address. Do not contact us again. We mean it. This is final. Zach is our son. You are nothing. That's when it became real. They had chosen, not just Zach, not just their pride. They had chosen to erase me. I moved into Grandpa's house fully after that. I quit my temp job and poured everything into running his antique store. I worked hard. I got it profitable again. I kept the legacy alive, one dusty vase and forgotten clock at a time. Still, every night, I sat at the kitchen table and wondered how things had come to this. How the people who raised me, who named me, could turn so completely. But what I didn't know was that they weren't done yet. 6 months later, I got a call from my lawyer. Dad was contesting the will. Apparently, he and Zach had dug up some old handwriting analysis expert who claimed the letter Grandpa wrote me was forged. They accused me of coercing him, of manipulating a dying man into changing his will. It was disgusting. Worse, they were trying to seize the house and the store under the grounds of undue influence. I'd have to fight it in court. I had to drain almost everything Grandpa left me just to defend myself. But I did, because I knew who I was. And I knew what Grandpa meant when he said, "They don't deserve it." They did in single quotes. By the time the court ruled in my favor, a full year had passed. A whole year without a word from my parents, but the damage was done. The store was barely breaking even from all the legal cost. My reputation in town was shaky. Dad had spread rumors, ugly ones. I was exhausted, alone. And then came the second envelope. This time, it arrived in the mail. No return address, just like before. But inside was something I never expected, a USB drive, and a letter, in Grandpa's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means your father did exactly what I feared he would. But don't worry, I always knew he would betray you. I prepared for it. Now it's your turn. Inside that envelope was more than just a USB drive and a note. It was a key to unraveling years of secrets, manipulation, and bitterness I hadn't dared to imagine. The letter continued, "Your father wasn't always like this. But somewhere along the line, greed changed him. Maybe it started when your mother got into his head. Maybe it was always there, waiting. Either way, I've kept records, proof, and now they're yours." I plugged in the USB with shaking hands. I didn't know what I expected, maybe old pictures or property documents. What I found was a bombshell. The drive contained folders, dozens, each meticulously labeled. Bank transfers, audio recordings, family trust edits, Diane's messages, Zach's loans. My eyes widened. Inside were scanned documents, some going back 15 years. Grandpa had tracked every shady move, every betrayal, every backdoor deal my parents had made behind his back. I started with the bank transfers. There, clear as day, were records of my father siphoning money from Grandpa's business account into one under his name. Small amounts at first, $500 here, $1,000 there. But over time, it grew. Tens of thousands. Then the Zach's loans folder, student loans and credit cards opened under Grandpa's name. Without his knowledge, Zach had maxed them out, never repaid a cent. I felt sick. I remembered Grandpa stressing about sudden overdrafts or credit card bills he didn't recognize. I thought it was early dementia, but no, it was them. But the recordings, that's when everything changed. The first was dated for years before Grandpa died. I clicked play. Dad's voice, he's losing it, can't remember where he puts his keys, let alone who owns what. We could start moving things into our name. Mom's voice, he favors the younger one anyway, that little leech. He'll leave everything to him if we don't act fast. I covered my mouth. Tears welled up. They were planning this for years. Another recording. Zach, what if he finds out I took that loan? Mom, then we say he co-signed it. He won't remember. And even if he does, no one will believe an old man over his own son. These weren't just callous conversations. This was calculated theft, exploitation of an aging man, a father. I spent the next several hours going through every file, Every detail Grandpa had gathered told me to things. He knew he was surrounded by vipers. He didn't want justice while he was alive, he wanted me to bring it afterward. And he knew I'd be the only one left standing. When the dust settled, there was one final folder, to be released upon my death. It contained a video file. I hit play. Grandpa sat at his desk, wearing his usual cardigan. His eyes looked tired, but sharp. If you're watching this, kid, then your father did exactly what I knew he would. Contest. The will, smear your name, cast you out. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I needed you to see them for who they really are. This drive contains everything. I've made backup copies, given one to my attorney, and another to a journalist friend I trust just in case. When you're ready, I want you to make this public. All of it. Let the world see what they did. Let them taste the shame they tried to serve you. They took my love and twisted it into something selfish. They've broken too many things. It's time someone broke them. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just revenge. It was righteous fury. I wrestled with what to do next. Should I expose my own parents? Was I strong enough? But then I remembered how they turned their backs on me like I was nothing. How they stole from Grandpa, erased his dignity. How they called me a snake while they slithered through lies. No, this wasn't revenge. This was justice. I reached out to the lawyer Grandpa mentioned. He confirmed everything. He'd been holding onto copies of the files, waiting for my call. Then, I contacted the journalist Grandpa trusted, a retired investigative reporter named Peter Lang. He listened patiently. I told him everything. When I handed over the files, he didn't flinch. If half of this checks out, he said, they're going to regret ever crossing Joe Carver's grandson. The story broke 2 weeks later. Elderly man exploited by family grandson uncovers decades of fraud after grandfather's death. It exploded. Local news ran it. Then regional, then national. They showed clips of the recordings, printed images of the forged documents, described the financial abuse in grim, meticulous detail. There was a photo of Grandpa smiling, holding one of his antique clocks, and beside it, a screenshot of Dad's bank account with the stolen funds highlighted. It wasn't just a scandal. It was a firestorm. My phone blew up. Messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. High school classmates, old neighbors, even teachers, but not my parents. Not at first. They went silent. Then Zach cracked. He posted a long, rambling defense on Facebook. I didn't know what Mom and Dad were doing. They said Grandpa was losing it. I just trusted them. But the comments weren't kind. You stole from your dying grandfather. You let your brother carry the burden while you partied. He deleted the post within a day. Deactivated his account. My parents weren't so lucky. Dad lost his job within a week. His company didn't want to be associated with someone accused of financial elder abuse, even if legal action hadn't yet landed. Mom's bridge club expelled her publicly. Their church removed them from leadership roles. They went from respected community members to pariahs. And then the final blow hit. Charges were filed. Fraud, financial exploitation, identity theft. The DA said the evidence was unusually thorough. Thanks, Grandpa. One night, maybe 2 weeks after the story broke, I heard a knock on the antique store's front door. It was Mom. Alone. She looked wrecked, hollowed out. Her face was pale, lips chapped. She had aged 10 years into weeks. I opened the door but said nothing. She didn't step inside. I didn't know he had all that, she said softly. I didn't think he'd leave it to you. I laughed bitterly. You didn't think he'd fight back. She nodded slowly. We were angry. We felt like you turned him against us. I stared at her. I gave up 2 years of my life to care for him. Zach couldn't even text him. And you call me the betrayer. She lowered her eyes. I just wanted us to be a family again. That's when I lost it. No, you didn't. You wanted your reputation back. You wanted forgiveness without accountability. You didn't even come to his hospital bed when he asked for you. I held his hand when he died. Not you. She flinched. I stepped back and closed the door. That night, I stood in Grandpa's room, surrounded by the antiques he loved. I felt peace for the first time in years, but I also felt something else. Power. Not the greedy kind. Not the kind that hoards or hurts, the kind that restores. I had taken back the truth, preserved his legacy, exposed the rot beneath the smiles. The next day, I visited his grave. I sat beside it, rested my hand on the stone, and whispered. They tried to erase me. You saved me, and now, I've saved you. And in the quiet, I felt it. Closure. Maybe. Or maybe justice finally landing where it belonged. Closure is a strange thing. People think it feels like a door slamming shut, clean and final. But for me, It was more like standing on the wreckage of a house that once held my entire identity broken, but still standing, still breathing. After the story broke, after the legal fallout, and after Mom showed up at my store trying to rewrite history, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. The truth was out. My parents were exposed. The town knew the kind of people they really were. But that didn't undo the years I spent starving for their love. That didn't erase the countless nights I stared at the ceiling, wondering why I wasn't enough. Justice may have prevailed, but wounds like mine don't close cleanly. A few months later, the legal proceedings came to a head. Zach struck a deal. He admitted guilt, claimed coercion, and threw both my parents under the bus. He avoided jail time in exchange for testifying against them. Classic Zach, no integrity, no loyalty, just self-preservation wrapped in cowardice. My parents weren't so lucky. They were both sentenced to probation and ordered to repay restitution to Grandpa's estate. They lost nearly everything: their home, their cars, their social circles. Their reputations were permanently stained. But I didn't watch their sentencing. I couldn't. I stayed at the store that day, dusting off an old globe Grandpa once told me he bought after his honeymoon. I turned it slowly, watching the world spin, and thought, this is what surviving looks like. But life has a way of continuing, even after it feels like it should have stopped. The antique shop carver and some began to thrive again. The media coverage brought in curious tourists and antique enthusiasts from all over. Some came just to talk to me. Some came to offer comfort. Others came just to say, good for you. You did the right thing. I didn't always know what to say. But one regular stood out: a retired school teacher named Ellen. She came in every Thursday afternoon, browsed the same aisle of old books, and eventually asked me if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. We talked for hours that first day, about everything: loss, betrayal, family, and healing. She didn't judge. She didn't pity me. She listened. And I realized something that day. Family doesn't have to mean blood. Sometimes it's the people who sit with you in silence, who don't need you to perform, or apologize, or prove your worth, who see you and stay. Around the 1-year anniversary of Grandpa's death, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Dad. My hands trembled as I opened it. You ruined us, it began. You embarrassed your mother and me beyond repair. We were your parents. You owed us loyalty. Instead, you sided with a senile old man. You threw away your family for a pile of money and a bit of fame. It went on like that. 3 pages of rage, denial, and bitterness. Not once did he say sorry. But there was one sentence that stood out. He always said you were his favorite. Maybe he was right. Maybe we never understood you. But you'll be alone in the end. Just like he was. That last line echoed in my head for days. Alone in the end. Was that what Grandpa feared too? That even after everything, I'd be left holding only memories, with no real future. I didn't want that to be true. I went to Grandpa's grave again, this time with a letter of my own. I sat down, unfolded it, and read aloud: Dear Grandpa, they tried to break me, tried to make me feel worthless. But you reminded me I mattered. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. I honored your wishes. I exposed the truth. I don't know what comes next, but I'm trying. I'm building something here. Something small, but honest. I miss you every day, but I carry you with me. Love, the grandson you believed in. Not long after that, something unexpected happened. Grandpa's lawyer called me again. He said there had been a second account, a trust he never mentioned. One created over a decade ago. Apparently, it had been quietly growing investments, dividends, interest compounding over the years. The total, over $750. My jaw dropped. I had no idea. None. He'd set it up just for me. With one simple instruction in the trust documents: use this to build the life they said you didn't deserve. At first, I didn't know what to do with the money. I already had the store. I had enough to live. I wasn't chasing luxury. I wanted purpose. So I renovated the shop, added a small reading room, a little coffee corner, and a community space. Started hosting story nights free for anyone who wanted to come share memories of the past. Old folks came to tell stories about their youth. Kids came with their grandparents. Lonely people found connection. Laughter echoed in those walls again. I named the space Joe's Corner. And for the first time in a long time, the store felt like home. Then, one chilly Saturday morning, as I was sweeping the front steps, I saw her. Mom. She looked different. No makeup, no jewelry, just a worn coat and eyes that looked like they hadn't stopped crying for months. She didn't try to come closer. She just stood across the street, watching. I stared at her. My pulse raced. I didn't wave. She didn't either. Then she turned and walked away. And just like that, she was gone again. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Because this time, I wasn't the broken child begging for love. This time, I was the man Grandpa raised me to be. The man who stood up when everyone else tried to knock him down. The man who didn't just survive betrayal but transformed it. A year later, I got an email from Zach. The subject line, "I don't deserve your time, but please read." It sat in my inbox for 3 days before I opened it. "I know you probably hate me. I deserve it. I messed up. Badly. I was selfish, reckless, and I let mom and dad use me. I let them use you. I lost everything. Friends, money, my name. I'm trying to rebuild. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Zach. I didn't respond. Not because I hadn't forgiven him, but because some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. And sometimes silence is the kindest boundary we can set. These days, I wake up early. I walk through the shop, make coffee, feed the cat Grandpa rescued, and I kept Whiskers, now old and slow, but still feisty. I turn on the lights in Joe's corner and prepare for whatever the day brings. Sometimes, I catch a glimpse of my reflection in the shop's front window, and I smile. Because I see him and me. The resilience, the quiet strength, the fire that refuses to die. They once told me, "You're no longer family." But what they didn't realize was, that set me free. I was no longer bound to their dysfunction, their lies, their chains of manipulation. I built something better. I built truth. And that, in the end, was Grandpa's greatest revenge. Not the scandal, not the headlines, not even the money, but me. Standing here, unbroken, exactly as he always believed I could be.